Let's get more, should we, in the form of the Labour Party, the opposition. Jonathan Reynolds, Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. That's a mouthful, isn't it, on your business card? My goodness me, your leader must have had quite an enjoyable weekend.
Well, clearly, we've seen a lot of our political opponents have continued to have a difficult time, but I would say in politics you make your own luck and you've got to be in a position to benefit from your opponent's weakness where they've made mistakes like this, and I think that's what we can say in the Labour Party that we've done. On Boris Johnson, I think people will be watching this just saying, when is this soap opera going to stop? You know, I think the Conservative Party as a whole needs some time to sort itself out. It would be much better doing that in opposition rather than where it can cause any damage to the country going forward. But these kind of claims, if you claim people are forcing you out, you don't then go and resign. That makes no sense whatsoever.
Will you vote for him to be suspended?
Well, I have to see the report. I mean, this is the whole joke of his
and he's resigned.
Claims. Well, you know, this claim it's a kangaroo court. Conservative majority on that committee, Conservative majority in Parliament to vote on it. If you are found guilty, the recall petition is actually like an election. You've got to have up to 10,000 of your constituents vote for it. Then you've got a by-election in which you can stand. So he had everything going for him. I honestly believe Boris Johnson doesn't know what the truth is. I think he doesn't know when he's lying. I think that's often what's got him into trouble in his life and career. But we'll have to see the report and see what it says. You'll
be eyeing up all three of the seats after the resignations over the weekend, eyeing up all three of those constituencies. Not necessarily going to win them, are you?
Well, we're definitely going to contest them very strongly. You're right to say these are not...
You won't step down and let the Lib Dems have a
Certainly not. We're in second place in these seats. We are the challenger. We are the alternative to the Conservative government. That's the case that we'll be putting forward. You're right to say we're taking nothing for granted. I mean, these are seats we've not traditionally held, so we'll have to work very hard, put our case forward for that. But I think particularly our message on the economy, on the cost of living, on getting this country back on its feet, restoring some pride and self-respect and removing this soap opera of a government, I think that's a compelling case in every part of the country.
What about Nicola Sturgeon?
Well, obviously, we're going to comment on the specifics, but I think what we've seen...
Should she step down or should she be suspended while there's an ongoing legal inquiry?
Well, the police investigation should obviously be there to run its course and not be interfered with in any way. But I would simply say with the SNP, their dissent from a few years ago, where frankly they looked all-powerful, is clearly what's going to get the attention. Their record in government in Scotland is awful as well. And I think I was in Scotland quite a lot of last week. People do want an alternative. They do want a change. And I will put the case to anyone in Scotland that change should come from a change in the UK government to a Labour government and not from independence. And I'm very, very confident in making that case.
OK, but should she step down?
I'm not going to comment on what she should do. I think the police investigation should run its course.
Let's say.
Well, look, I understand she's been released without charge at this stage.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to comment on the court case. I understand.
Oh, you mean the...
I'm asking whether she should be suspended while that is... or the legal case. While that is continuing, should she be suspended or should she say, you know what, I'm just going to step back from being an MSP for now?
Look, her treatment as a former First Minister, I think, should be the same as any other backbencher or member of the Scottish Parliament. I understand where there's an investigation of this kind, they don't usually resign or suspend them from the Scottish Parliament in this way. I understand there is a privileges process similar to what we've been talking about in relation to Boris Johnson in the House of Commons. But I think the soap opera itself detracts from the fact that people do want a change in Scotland, and I think that the change that we're putting forward is what we can sell them.
So Labour doesn't think she should be suspended?
Well, look, I'm not going to comment on the specifics of it. I haven't seen the charges that have been brought against her. I don't know.
She hasn't got any charges brought against her yet?
I don't know the case with that. So I simply would say that is for the Scottish Parliament to deal with, as it usually would. And I think the political case for us to make is the change in the future of Scotland, which will come from a UK Labour government.
You must be thrilled, though, at what's happening in Scotland at the moment as far as politics is concerned, even though you are significantly behind the SNP still.
Well, look, I have always believed that the best future for Scotland is within the UK. And I think the way to make more people, convinced of that case is through showing them what a UK Labour government could do in terms of industrial policy, getting the economy growing again, sorting out public services, respecting the devolution that exists in some of those key areas, but working with Scotland in order to give them the future they deserve. And I think we can do that. We are, of course, excited that the polls show Labour coming back and winning in a significant number of seats potentially in Scotland, because usually what people want to know in a general election in England, they want to know, can Labour win in Scotland, because that's crucial to forming a majority. And in Scotland, they want to know, can Labour win in England? And we can say after the local elections and the polls that we've seen, the answer to both those questions is yes.
Talk to me about the £28 billion that you promised to spend on green projects. Are you still planning to spend that? I was looking at that. It was something like £28 billion a year until 2030. Now it would appear that you've rowed back on that and said £28 billion a year after 2027.
It's a welcome clarification. The bottom line is this. Labour is still committed to the kind of active industrial policy that will deliver net zero and generate good jobs in all parts of the country. Public investment, to leverage in a much greater amount of private investment, has always been key to that. So is planning reform, so is changes to business rates, to how the apprenticeship levy works, so you've got the skills and supply chain to do that. It was always the case. It's not like a tap where you can just turn on £28 billion. The projects we've looked at to allocate that to are things like home energy efficiency, green steel, getting the gigafactories our automotive sector needs. And some of those will have to be built up over time. But it's also important that we can say that, look, I've always believed economic transformation and sound money are not in contest with each other. You've got to have both. Now, Liz Truss's government, horrible as it was for the British people and anyone with a mortgage, did prove that very, very clearly. So we're putting our ambitions and our policies in the context of the overall economic policy that we will run. I think that clarity is welcome because more and more people are clearly looking at the polls and thinking there could be a Labour government. We want to know the details.
OK, so where was the misunderstanding then? Because Rachel Reeves said £28 billion a year to spend on green projects.
Look, £28 billion a year is broadly the level of investment that is projected to be required.
She didn't say broadly, she said £28 billion.
Let me explain the figure, though. It is the figure required for the kind of economic transformation that is necessary to hit net zero.
And that's what you said you would invest? We
are talking about now, yes, but what people want to know, are you going to keep that figure in review in relation to how quickly you can deliver those projects?
You said it every year.
But now we've put the clarity on it that is required because there has been a substantial change in, I think, particularly the cost of servicing the UK's debt following the Liz Truss government brief as it was. You've got to put your ambitions in the context of how you will deliver them.
So it was only an ambition?
Well, that is the level of investment we want to get up to. What we're talking about now is how we will deliver it. Well, I think the Labour Party is saying very clearly, we recognise to turn around the fact that the UK has the lowest business investment in the G7. We've got to replicate what some other countries have done, leverage in that private investment, spend some more money. The figure required is the figure required to do the overall transformation. That was the right thing to say. We're talking about how we're going to deliver it in the here and now, in the financial environment that we're in and the fiscal envelope that we'll inherit.
So you might change some of your other figures as well then?
Well, no, but I would always say that what the lodestar has to be is a commitment to fiscal discipline, to our fiscal rules of making sure we can deliver what we're about. That's what people always know. We've got good ambitions in the Labour Party. We've got good intentions for public services. They want to know, are we going to be able to deliver that? Are we going to recognise the conditions that we're facing? That is all that we've clarified this weekend. But the big story is still there's a big dividing line between ourselves and the Conservative Party, because if you want the kind of industrial policy that will give a future for the automotive sector, the steel sector, will deliver good jobs in all parts of the country, you're only going to get that from Labour. You're not going to get that from the Conservative Party because they simply don't believe in it.
Well, they might say something different. I'm sure they will next time they're on. Jonathan Reynolds, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.